Delhi Sultanate. The Delhi Sultanate was an Islamic empire based in Delhi that stretched over large parts of the Indian subcontinent for 320 years. 5 dynasties ruled over the Delhi Sultanate sequentially: the Mamluk slave dynasty, the Khilji dynasty, the Tughlaq dynasty, the Sayyid dynasty, and the Lodi dynasty. It covered parts of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and some parts of southern Nepal. As a successor to the short-lived Ghurid Empire, the Delhi Sultanate was originally one among a number of principalities ruled by Turkic slave generals of Muhammad Ghori, who had conquered large parts of northern India, including Yildiz, Aybek and Kubacha, that had inherited and divided the Ghurid territories amongst themselves. After a long period of infighting, the Mamluks were overthrown in the Khalji Revolution, which marked the transfer of power from the Turks to a heterogeneous Indo-Masaman nobility. Both of the resulting Khalji and Tughlaq dynasties respectively saw a new wave of rapid Muslim conquests deep into South India. The Sultanate finally reached the peak of its geographical reach during the Tughlaq dynasty, occupying most of the Indian subcontinent. This was followed by decline due to Hindu reconquests, states such as the Vijayanagara Empire and Mewar asserting independence, and new Muslim sultanates such as the Bengal Sultanate breaking off. In 1526, the Sultanate was conquered and succeeded by the Mughal Empire. The Sultanate is noted for its integration of the Indian subcontinent into a global cosmopolitan culture, being one of the few powers to repel attacks by the Mongols and for enthroning one of the few female rulers in Islamic history, Razia Sultana, who reigned from 1236 to 1240. Bakhtiyar Khalji's annexations were responsible for the large-scale desecration of Hindu and Buddhist temples and the destruction of universities and libraries. Mongolian raids on West and Central Asia set the scene for centuries of migration of fleeing soldiers, learned men, mystics, traders, artists, and artisans from those regions into the subcontinent, thereby establishing Islamic culture in India and the rest of the region. History. Background. The context behind the rise of the Delhi Sultanate in India was part of a wider trend affecting much of the Asian continent, including the whole of southern and western Asia, the influx of nomadic Turkic peoples from the Central Asian steppes. This can be traced back to the 9th century when the Islamic Caliphate began fragmenting in the Middle East, where Muslim rulers in rival states began enslaving non-Muslim nomadic Turks from the Central Asian steppes and raising many of them to become loyal military slaves called Mamluks. Soon, Turks were migrating to Muslim lands and becoming Islamicized. Many of the Turkic Mamluk slaves eventually rose up to become rulers and conquered large parts of the Muslim world, establishing Mamluk sultanates from Egypt to Afghanistan before turning their attention to the Indian subcontinent. It is also part of a longer trend predating the spread of Islam. Like other settled, agrarian societies in history, those in the Indian subcontinent have been attacked by nomadic tribes throughout its long history. In evaluating the impact of Islam on the subcontinent, one must note that the northwestern subcontinent was a frequent target of tribes raiding from Central Asia in the pre-Islamic era. In that sense, the Muslim intrusions and later Muslim invasions were not dissimilar to those of the earlier invasions during the first millennium. By 962 AD, Hindu and Buddhist kingdoms in South Asia were under a wave of raids from Muslim armies from Central Asia. Among them was Mahmud of Ghazni, the son of a Turkic Mamluk military slave, who raided and plundered kingdoms in North India from east of the Indus River to west of Yamuna River 17 times between 997 and 1030. Mahmud of Ghazni raided the treasuries but retracted each time, only extending Islamic rule into western Punjab. The wave of raids on North Indian and Western Indian kingdoms by Muslim warlords continued after Mahmud of Ghazni. The raids did not establish or extend the permanent boundaries of their Islamic kingdoms. The Ghurid Sultan Mu'izz ad-Din Muhammad Ghori, commonly known as Muhammad of Ghor, began a systematic war of expansion into North India in 1173. He sought to carve out a principality for himself by expanding the Islamic world. Muhammad of Ghor sought a Sunni Islamic kingdom of his own extending east of the Indus River, and he thus laid the foundation for the Muslim kingdom called the Delhi Sultanate. Some historians chronicle the Delhi Sultanate from 1192 due to the presence and geographical claims of Muhammad Ghori in South Asia by that time. Ghori was assassinated in 1206 by Ismaili Shia Muslims in some accounts or by Khokhars in others. After the assassination, one of Ghori's slaves, the Turkic Qutb al-Din Aybek, assumed power, becoming the first Sultan of Delhi. Dynasties. Mamluk dynasty. Qutb al-Din Aybek, a former slave of Mu'izz ad-Din Muhammad Ghori, was the first ruler of the Delhi Sultanate. Aybek was of Cuman Kipchak origin, and due to his lineage, his dynasty is known as the Mamluk dynasty. Aybek reigned as the Sultan of Delhi for 4 years, from 1206 to 1210. Aibak was known for his generosity and people called him Lakhdata. After Aibak died, Aram Shah assumed power in 1210, but he was assassinated in 1211 by Aibak's son-in-law, Shamsuddin Iltutmish. Iltutmish's power was precarious, and a number of Muslim amirs challenged his authority as they had been supporters of Qutb al-Din Aibak. After a series of conquests and brutal executions of opposition, Iltutmish consolidated his power. His rule was challenged a number of times, such as by Kubacha, and this led to a series of wars. Iltutmish conquered Multan and Bengal from contesting Muslim rulers, as well as Ranthambore and Sivalik from the Hindu rulers. He also attacked, defeated, and executed Taj al-Din Yildiz, who asserted his rights as heir to Muiz ad-Din Muhammad Ghori. Iltutmish's rule lasted till 1236. Following his death, the Delhi Sultanate saw a succession of weak rulers, disputing Muslim nobility, assassinations, and short-lived tenures. Power shifted from Ranud-Din Firuz to Razia Sultana and others until Ghiyas-ud-Din Balban came to power and ruled from 1266 to 1287. He was succeeded by 17-year-old Muiz-ud-Din Kikabad, who appointed Jalal-ud-Din Firuz Khalji as the commander of the army. Khalji assassinated Kikabad and assumed power, thus ending the Mamluk dynasty and starting the Khalji dynasty. Qutb al-Din Aibak initiated the construction of the Qutub Minar. It is known that Aibak started the construction of Qutb Minar but died without completing it. It was later completed by his son-in-law Iltutmish. The Quwa-ul-Islam Mosque was built by Aibak, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Qutub Minar complex or Qutbi complex was expanded by Iltutmish and later by Ala-ud-Din Khalji in the early 14th century. During the Mamluk dynasty, many nobles from Afghanistan and Persia migrated and settled in India, as West Asia came under Mongol siege. Khalji dynasty. The Khalji dynasty was of Turco-Afghan heritage. They were originally of Turkic origin. They had long been settled in present-day Afghanistan before proceeding to Delhi in India. The name Khalji refers to an Afghan town known as Kalati Khalji. They were treated by others as ethnic Pashtuns due to adoption of some Pashtun habits and customs. As a result of this, the dynasty is referred to as Turco-Afghan. The dynasty later also had Indian ancestry through Jityapali, wife of Alauddin Khalji and mother of Shihabuddin Omar. The first ruler of the Khalji dynasty was Jalal-ud-Din Firuz Khalji. Firuz Khalji had already gathered enough support among the Pashtuns for taking over the crown. He came to power in 1290 after killing the last ruler of the Mamluk dynasty, Muiz-ud-Din Kikabad, with the support of Pashtun and Turkic nobles. He was around 70 years old at the time of his ascension and was known as a mild-mannered, humble and kind monarch to the general public. Jalal-ud-Din Firuz was of Turco-Afghan origin and ruled for 6 years before he was murdered in 1296 by his nephew and son-in-law Juna Muhammad Khalji, who later came to be known as Ala-ud-Din Khalji. Ala-ud-Din began his military career as governor of Kara province, from where he led 2 raids on Malwa and Devagiri for plunder and loot. His military campaigning returned to these lands as well other South Indian kingdoms after he assumed power. He conquered Gujarat, Ranthambore, Chittor, and Malwa. However, these victories were cut short because of Mongol attacks and plunder raids from the northwest. The Mongols withdrew after plundering and stopped raiding northwest parts of the Delhi Sultanate. After the Mongols withdrew, Ala-ud-Din Khalji continued to expand the Delhi Sultanate into southern India with the help of generals such as Malik Kafur and Khusro Khan. They collected much war booty from those they defeated. His commanders collected war spoils and paid ghanima, which helped strengthen the Khalji rule. Among the spoils was the Warangal loot that included the famous Koh-i-Noor diamond. Ala-ud-Din Khalji changed tax policies, raising agriculture taxes from 20% to 50%, eliminating payments and commissions on taxes collected by local chiefs, banned socialization among his officials as well as intermarriage between noble families to help prevent any opposition forming against him, and he cut salaries of officials, poets, and scholars. These tax policies and spending controls strengthened his treasury to pay the keep of his growing army. He also introduced price controls on all agriculture produce and goods in the kingdom, as well as controls on where, how, and by whom these goods could be sold. Markets called Shahana-i-Mandi were created. Muslim merchants were granted exclusive permits and monopoly in these mandis to buy and resell at official prices. No one other than these merchants could buy from farmers or sell in cities. Those found violating these mandi rules were severely punished, often by mutilation. Taxes collected in the form of grain were stored in the kingdom's storage. During famines that followed, these granaries ensured sufficient food for the army. Historians note Ala-ud-Din Khalji as being a tyrant. Anyone Ala-ud-Din suspected of being a threat to this power was killed along with the women and children of that family. He grew to eventually distrust the majority of his nobles and favored only a handful of his own slaves and family. In 1298, between 15,000 and 30,000 people near Delhi, who had recently converted to Islam, were slaughtered in a single day, due to fears of an uprising. He is also known for his cruelty against kingdoms he defeated in battle. After Ala-ud-Din's death in 1316, his eunuch general Malik Kafur, who was born to a Hindu family but converted to Islam, assumed de facto power and was supported by non-Khalij nobles like the Pashtuns, notably Kamal al-Din Gur. However, he lacked the support of the majority of Khalij nobles who had him assassinated, hoping to take power for themselves. However, the new ruler had the killers of Kafur executed. The last Khalji ruler was Ala-ud-Din Khalji's 18-year-old son Qutbi-ud-Din Mubarak Shah Khalji, who ruled for 4 years before he was killed by Khusro Khan, another slave general with Hindu origins, who reverted from Islam and favored his Hindu Baradu military clan in the nobility. Khusro Khan's reign lasted only a few months, when Ghazi Malik, later to be called Ghiat al-Din Tughlaq, defeated him with the help of Punjabi Khokhar tribesmen and assumed power in 1320, thus ending the Khalji dynasty and starting the Tughlaq dynasty.